We have the hip thigh extension here, starting with the head relaxed, shoulders relaxed, palms in a supinated or externally rotated position here. Idea is we contract the glutes and we drive the heel through the floor, providing hip extension. Paying close attention to keep the hips high and even, and try not to have this movement done by back extension, but really hip extension through the hip. So in this case, the left glute's contracted before the move, driving the heel right through the floor to facilitate extension at the hip. So we're looking to keep the hips high and even, core tight, hips tight, but the shoulders and breathing nice and relaxed. We have single leg supine hip extension here. Progression of the exercise from a bridge to the floor, because now we have an unstable surface that we're working with. Cues for the head and shoulders and the arms are to remain the same, relaxed, externally rotated or supinated position here. The cue is squeeze the left glute, drive the left heel into the ball, and get that hip extension to get the hips high and even. Try not to get too much lordosis or extension of the spine, and try to realize that we're really trying to get this move from the hip. Great way to challenge the body. Supine hip extension here, 2 legs on the ball, palms up to the ceiling, shoulders, head relaxed. Squeeze both the glutes together before the move, drive the heels into the ball, and try to get those hips high and even via hip extension, not back extension. Progression from that is now we get the leg curl or the S.H.E.L.C. So we do our supine hip extension S.H.E.L.C. Now we curl it in. Pay attention that the hip is in a nice straight line right here, and it stays extended. They'll have a tendency to drop down, but we want to keep that hip extension the entire time. So our cues are up, in, out, down. Here we're going to go supine hip extension curl, and then we like to stay with it here with the hips staying up now. Notice that the hips stay up and we never drop down into hip flexion, staying contracted the entire time. Now what we can do is go in with the S.H.E.L.C, and we call this an eccentric because then we'll go out with 1. So go in with 2, out with 1. Very difficult move. We can go that all the way to a single leg S.H.E.L.C now. So now we've just gone unilateral. TRX supine hip extension, both heels in the straps. Assume our similar S.H.E.L.C or hip extension position, palms externally rotated. Initiate the move by squeezing the glutes, contracting them together, and trying your best to drive the heels into those straps. Trying not to get too much lumbar extension through there, and just notice that we're really trying the best to use the legs. And then to progress that, we can go leg curl after the S.H.E.L.C. So we'll call that our S.H.E.L.C. Trying to keep that hip extension the whole time, especially at the top. Now we have single leg supine hip extension here. We'll take the double handle mode from the TRX strap, get it into our single handle mode by passing the loop through twice, and then give it a good test and assume that supine position here in a down position. Heel goes into the strap here, so we have one nice part here. Get yourself set so you can drive straight down into the strap. So we try not to get back extension again. Contract the glute before we move, so we lock in the glute, drive the heel right into that strap, getting the hips high and even because we're getting hip extension here, trying not to get lumbar spine extension. So with going unilateral here as we switch legs, we really try to focus on those anterior superior iliac spines being high and even here. So I'm just looking, can I get the hips high and even? We have our reverse lunge here, dropping straight down, weight through the front heel, pulling yourself up through the heel. The idea of this exercise is mainly to go straight up, straight down, try not to shift weight forward and backwards, that pulling through the heel. Really try to facilitate extension of the hip, pulling through the heel, not pushing off the toe here. Really get that posterior chain. Just like the regular reverse lunge, now we just use a valve slide. Same idea, keeping the weight on the front heel as much as possible, dropping straight down and pulling yourself up through that posterior chain. We cue the posture to be head up, chest up, and really keep those hips forward. In this case, I'm going to shoot that left leg back, stay tall, and pull through that right heel to get as much posterior chain as we can. The quads we like to cue on these types of things will get enough work as it is. Here we have our step up here, a progression from the reverse lunge, but the idea is the same in the sense that we really want to facilitate posterior chain. hip dominant exercise. In this case, we really want to pull through that right heel and really focus on extension of that right hip as much as possible, finishing it real tall, real straight. We switch legs, try to really pull up, control the descent, try not to push off the floor, but really pull up as much as we possibly can on that. Nice and tall, nice and straight every time. Really establish your posture at the top and really try to get that, again, pulling action through the hip. And we just have a switch over here and we just go a lateral step up now. So, the idea is the same, pulling through the hips. In this case, we really want to keep the toes in the shoes straight ahead, the hips squared straight ahead, the shoulders straight ahead. You're really going to want to get a hip hike and crooked on this one from the side, but again, we just try to stay as straight as we possibly can, just really getting the idea of pulling through that heel, not so much pushing off the toe on this particular one. So we line it up straight, finishing it real tall, finishing it smooth. Notice that I am kind of coming back a little bit with the heel there, just like a forward step up. Now we just get, again, a little different plane of movement here. So we finish it tall, finish it strong. And then we have a crossover step up. So I just switched the leg, and now I'm getting a little bit more rotation out of this one now. So now it's going to be a little bit more difficult to keep those hips squared away. In this case, we want that left hip and that left shoulder really trying to stay as straight as we can. Still want the shoes, the toes pointed straight ahead. We want that hip as straight as we can on that coming up. So we're going to get a pretty good actually stretch out of this one too when getting this crossover position. Pulling it up tall, finish it straight. Again, like the step up, like the reverse lunge, like our supine hip extensions, we really always want to get that hip involved as much as possible, not worrying about the knee. As I like to say, that'll take care of itself. We're getting plenty of quadriceps action here, knee extension, but I really like to just focus on getting that posterior chain.
Lateral lunges. We're going to step directly out to the side so the feet are parallel, about 3 to 4 feet, pushing the butt back and down. The key points here, we want hip flexion, we do not want spinal flexion. So the butt needs to shoot back and down, keeping the knee directly over the ankle. Toes are also straight ahead on this version. Rotational lunge. We're going to step back to the 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock positions here on a diagonal line, working in the transverse plane. The back foot is going to be at a 90-degree angle to the front leg. The front heel will stay on the ground, let the front toe come up to provide a fulcrum as you go through the rotational lunge here. Butt shoots back and down. Cross behind lunges. Here we're going to step behind to the 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock position so that the back knee is just behind the front heel, just on the opposite side of that, almost but not quite touching the ground. We're going to keep the hips squared to the front as much as possible on this variant. Single leg Romanian deadlift progressions. The first progression we like to use here is the single leg Romanian deadlift with the medicine ball reach. We're going to reach the ball for the front wall, reach the back heel towards the back wall. You'll notice that the foot on the back leg is pointed at the ground. That helps to keep the hip from externally rotating on the down leg. We want the hips nice and level, as if we're balancing a glass of water on them and don't want it to spill. You'll notice that there's a slight knee bend on the down leg as well, of about 20 degrees or so, which helps the glutes to engage on that side. This helps to get people out of that flexion pattern. They're just bending over at their lumbar spines and extend. Here they are going to extend their thoracic spine while they reach that back leg. The next version we're going to move into is the 2 dumbbell Romanian deadlift, starting with a dead pause on the box here, where we're going to elevate the box here a little bit. Reach the back leg back, slight bend on the down knee, and squeeze up, keeping the hips nice and level as if we're balancing that glass of water on the sacrum. Real long, and squeezing through that down leg's hip. We like the clients to reset on the box here so they can reset their hips rather than moving through there without anything below. That tends to be a little bit tough from a balance standpoint at first as you're learning the exercise. We'll move into that as a later progression. Really helps to push that back heel towards the wall, which helps the glute of the leg that's on the ground contract a little bit better. Next up, we'll move up to a progression where we're going to hold 2 dumbbells and not use the box here. So we're actually going to transition from eccentric to concentric on the way up here without a reset. Same cues apply. Reach the back leg back, keeping the toe pointed at the ground. Keep that back leg real long and a slight bend on the front leg as you come up to a tall position at the top. Very, very challenging exercise for a lot of clients. In this version, you can actually work up to handling some fairly heavy loads in each hand. So it can come around and be another type of progression. Then we'll move to the contra-loaded single arm, single leg Romanian deadlift. This is a tough one for a lot of clients in remembering which hand to hold the dumbbell in and which leg they're standing on and all that good stuff. So we'll tell them a couple different things. Either remember it by the leg moving back as the same side as the hand, or think of holding opposite the non-moving leg, which is the one that I typically use. Either way, it's always a challenge here. So we get a little cross-body core stabilization when we're holding opposite the stance leg. So it's a big-time core exercise.
Here's our single leg deadlift here. Putting a RX pad on the floor, in this case for a depth gauge. Trying to get down, and the cue is we want to touch that knee to the pad there, and not the shoe, not the foot. Notice that we're coming in that back position here. The cue is I like to shoot those arms forward, and I like to stay through that heel, drive that heel through the floor, come down, tap it, drive through the heel, finish tall every time. The thought process here is really getting those hips involved as in a deadlift, and not so much a squat like a quad dominant exercise.